The rain in Seattle doesn't fall like weather, it falls like judgment. And tonight, under the glow of a bank sign and a flickering street lamp, a 13-year-old boy sat on a milk crate with a pocket keyboard on his knees and a brass wind-up metronome clicking beside his shoe like a second heart. He played anyway. Because when you're hungry, when you're tired, when you're trying not to remember the last hospital room you ever saw, music is the one thing that doesn't ask you to explain yourself. Eli Carter's fingers were small, stiff, and a little swollen from cold. The keys on his keyboard were chipped, one of them stuck if you pressed too hard, and the speaker crackled on low notes. But the melody he pulled out of it didn't sound broken. It sounded like somebody had hidden a sunrise inside a storm. People hurried past under umbrellas, heads down, collars up. Some dropped quarters, a few dropped nothing, and still glanced back like they were annoyed to feel something they hadn't budgeted for. Eli kept his eyes mostly on the keys. He'd learned that looking up could make you hope, and hope could make you reckless. When his song shifted into something softer, something that felt like a lullaby half-remembered, an older woman stopped near the curb and pressed $1 into his open case. Not into his hand, into the case. Like she didn't want him to feel like he owed her eye contact. "Keep going, baby," she murmured, and moved on. Eli swallowed hard and kept going. A black SUV slid up to the curb at the far end of the block, glossy as a mirror and twice as cold. Behind it, a second SUV, then a sleek town car that looked like it belonged in a movie where nobody ever checks the price of anything. The glass doors of the high-rise across the street swung open, and out came the kind of man whose face you saw on airport monitors and tech conference banners. Grant Kessler, 58, silver hair that never looked wet even in Seattle. A charcoal coat cut so perfectly it made everyone else's clothes look like accidents, and an expression like the city owed him an apology for existing. Beside him moved his executive aide Maya Lin, holding a tablet and a calm smile that didn't reach her eyes. Two security guys flanked them with the quiet posture of men who had been paid to be unamused. Maya leaned in. "Mr. Kessler, traffic is building." "If we leave now," Grant stopped. Not because Maya spoke, not because he cared about traffic, because the melody drifted across the street and did something it had no business doing. It reached him. Eli didn't notice at first. He was mid-phrase, building a pattern the way his mom used to teach him. Start simple, then tell the truth slowly like you're easing someone into water that's colder than they expected. Then a voice cut through the rain. "Well, would you look at that?" Eli's hands jolted. One wrong note snapped out like a crack of ice. He looked up. Grant Kessler stood at the curb, staring at him like Eli was a problem someone should have cleaned up already. "Another sidewalk concert," Grant said loud enough for passers-by to hear. "Seattle really is committed to turning every corner into a complaint." A couple people slowed down. Drama in a city full of people pretending they don't care is still entertainment. Eli's throat tightened. He knew Grant's name. Everybody did. Grant Kessler's foundation sponsored half the big charity events in town. Grant Kessler's company owned blocks of glass and steel that scraped the sky. Grant Kessler's revitalization projects had pushed families out of neighborhoods and called it progress. Eli pulled his hands off the keys and tried to keep his voice even. "I'm just playing, sir." Grant's smile was thin. "You call that playing?" Maya shifted barely, like she wanted to step in, but had learned long ago what stepping in costs. Grant took one slow step closer, rain beading on his coat and refusing to ruin it. "How much do you make doing this?" he asked. $10, 20, if people feel guilty enough." Eli's cheeks warmed with something that wasn't heat. "It's enough. Enough." Grant repeated it like it was a joke. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a bill, crisp, clean, the kind of money that never sat sweaty in a palm. He held up a $100 bill like it was a magic trick. A few people actually stopped now. Phones came out. The city loved a story when it came with a villain who didn't know he was the villain. "You want real money, kid," Grant called, turning it into a performance. "Here's my offer." Maya's eyes widened. Mr. Kessler Grant ignored her. He aimed his voice at the sidewalk and the cameras and whatever part of himself still needed applause. "Next week, I'm hosting a fundraiser at the Elliott Bay Glass Pavilion. 500 guests. Donors. Press. Everyone who actually keeps this city running." He looked back down at Eli. "You show up and play something worth listening to. Not this Underpass noise. Eli's fingers curled around the edge of the crate. He hated how much the bill mattered. He hated how hungry made you polite. Grant lifted his chin. If you impress the room, if you impress even one person, I'll take you in. I'll adopt you. You'll have a home, school, lessons, a real future. A murmur ran through the small crowd. Shock, interest, the sweet sting of watching a kid get dangled over a cliff and calling it opportunity. Grant's smile sharpened. But when you fail, and you will fail, don't ever come back to my building. Don't play outside it. Don't stand near it. Don't try to make this city feel sorry for you in my shadow. Silence fell like wet cement. Eli stared at the bill, then at Grant, then at the phone's recording. Something in Eli's chest rose up quiet but stubborn. He thought of the metronome in his pocket, the dent on its side, the way it clicked even when everything else stopped. He took a breath. "Keep your money," Eli said. Grant blinked once, almost amused. Eli's voice steadied. "I'll take your challenge." Grant laughed short, hard, certain. He flicked the bill into Eli's case anyway, like feeding an animal at a zoo. "Thursday, 8 p.m., Sharp Grant said. "Ask for the service entrance, if you're brave enough to show." Then he turned and walked toward his waiting car like the scene was already finished. Maya lingered half a second eyes on Eli. Her mouth moved like she wanted to say something human. But then she followed Grant into the SUV, and the door shut with a soft, final sound. Eli sat there while the crowd drifted away, rain tapping the sidewalk like impatient fingers. The $100 bill stared up at him, bright and unforgiving. He picked up the metronome from his pocket and wound it once just to hear it. Click, 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 a heartbeat you can hold in your hand. He packed his keyboard carefully like it was fragile enough to break his whole life if he dropped it. And when he stood, he realized something that made his stomach twist. Grant Kessler didn't just want him to fail. Grant wanted him to fail in public. Harborlight Youth Shelter smelled like wet coats, disinfectant, and the kind of food that tries its best. It was warm, which felt like a luxury. It was loud, which felt like safety and chaos in the same breath. Kids argued over a TV that didn't always work. Volunteers handed out trays. Someone laughed too loudly at nothing just to prove they could. Raina Patel spotted Eli the moment he walked in with his keyboard case bumping against his hip. "Eli," she called already, reading his face. "Hey, come here." She guided him past the dinner line into a corner where the walls were covered in hand-drawn posters about job training and school enrollment, and "You matter," written in letters that looked like someone fought to believe it. Raina's hair was pulled back in a messy bun. Her badge, clipped to her sweater, was bent at the corner like she'd been grabbed by life and didn't pretend otherwise. "What happened?" she asked low. Eli told her. Every word. The bill. The crowd. The offer. The banishment. Raina's expression tightened until her jaw looked like it could crack. "Grant Kessler," she said, like the name had a bitter aftertaste. "Of course it's him." Eli looked down. "What if he's serious?" Raina leaned forward. "Baby, he's serious about one thing, being the one with power." She softened her voice. "People like that don't rescue somebody unless it makes them look like a hero. And he doesn't look like a hero unless somebody looks like a fool." Eli's throat burned. "Then I won't be the fool." A boy at the next table, Deshaun, 12, always watching, everything whispered, "You really gonna play for rich people?" Another kid, Lena, 9, small and sharp-eyed, leaned in. "Are they gonna put you on TV?" Eli tried to smile. It felt like pulling a sweater over bruises. "I don't know." Raina reached out and took his hands. His fingers were cold even inside the shelter. "You've got talent," she said. "But talent doesn't make a room fair. If you do this, you go in knowing it's rigged." Eli swallowed. "It's 1 week. I can handle 1 week." Raina's eyes flicked toward the hallway like she was making a decision. "Eli," she said carefully, "there's something I haven't told you because I didn't want to light a match near your hope." Eli's stomach sank. What Raina stood and walked to her small office. She returned with a manila folder thick enough to feel like trouble. "I've been looking," she said, "for your family. I didn't have much to go on. Your mom didn't leave a lot behind." She slid the folder toward him. "But I got a lead this week. A name connected to an old contact. A storefront." Eli's hands hovered over the folder like it could bite. "A man named Noah Reyes," Raina said. "He runs a place called Reyes Repair and Brass. Instrument repair. Horns, strings, old pianos. It might be nothing, but it might not be. Eli's breath caught so hard it almost hurt. I think your mother had reasons, Raina said, and I think you deserve the truth before you walk into Grant Kessler's trap. Eli opened the folder. Inside was a grainy photo of a shop squeezed between a fish and chips place and a nail salon, a faded sign, a bell on the door, instruments in the window, and behind a cluttered counter stood a man with gray hair, long fingers, and a tired gentleness in his eyes. Eli's heart stuttered. He saw his own hands in that man's hands. He didn't know if it meant hope or heartbreak. Raina squeezed his shoulder. If you want, I'll go with you. Eli shook his head, surprised by how fast the answer came. No, then softer I have to do this part myself. Raina nodded like she understood the cost of that sentence. Okay, she said. But hear me, Eli. Whatever happens at that pavilion, whatever he tries you're worth, isn't decided by one room. Eli looked down at the dented metronome in his palm. Click, click, click. 1 week, he whispered. 1 song. And somewhere in the shelter, a kid laughed at the TV like joy was still legal. Rhea's Repair and Brass was the kind of place you didn't find unless you were looking for something you couldn't order online. The windows were dusty, but the instruments behind the glass were polished like someone loved them. A trumpet with a shine that looked like sunlight. A cello with wood so warm it felt alive. An upright piano tucked in the corner, half covered like it was resting. Eli stood outside for a long time, rain dripping off his hood, his keyboard case cutting into his shoulder. Through the window, he saw the man from the photo, older, up-close hair, whiter, shoulders slightly hunched. He was bent over a saxophone neck, adjusting something with a tool so small it looked like jewelry. His hands didn't shake. Eli thought about his mom's hands. How they used to guide his fingers when he was little. How she'd tap his wrist and say, "Relax. The notes don't come out of tension. They come out of truth." He swallowed and pushed the door open. The bell chimed. The smell inside hit him first: wood polish, old paper metal, and time. Sheet music was stacked in leaning towers. Posters of jazz festivals and local shows covered the walls like memories that refused to move out. The man looked up. "Hey there," he said, voice low and rough around the edges. "You need a repair." Eli's voice tried to vanish. He forced it back. "I need practice space." The man's eyebrows lifted. Practice. Eli pulled out the $100 bill, crumpled now from being hidden. He hated that he had it. He hated that it worked. "I can pay," Eli said. The man didn't reach for the money. His gaze went to Eli's keyboard case, then to Eli's face. "That's a lot for a kill," he said quietly. "You in trouble?" Eli's throat tightened. "Not that kind." The man set down his tools and wiped his hands on a rag. Name Eli's heart pounded so hard it made the metronome in his pocket feel louder. "Eli," he said. "Eli Carter." The man nodded once. "I'm Noah." Eli tried to breathe. "I've got a performance. Next week." Noah's eyes flicked like he was already skeptical, where Eli forced the words out. "Elliott Bay Glass Pavilion. Grant Kessler's fundraiser." Noah froze so completely it was like the shop lost sound for a second. "Kessler," Noah said. "That man?" Eli watched him carefully. "You know him?" Noah's mouth twisted. "He came in here years ago. Tried to buy a horn that belonged to a musician who's dead now. Like it was decor. Like history was a souvenir." He shook his head. "When I said no, he offered to buy the whole building." Eli's breath caught, and Noah snorted. "And I told him to take his money somewhere that appreciated it." Eli almost smiled. It flickered and vanished. He swallowed and said the next part, like stepping off a roof. "My mom was Mara Carter," Eli said. She taught music." Noah's face drained of color. The rag slipped from his fingers and hit the floor. "Mara," he whispered like the name was a wound he'd kept covered too long. Then louder, disbelieving, "Your Eli's eyes burned. I'm her son." He swallowed again. "Are you my dad?" The question hung there between shelves of instruments and years of silence. Noah Reyes sank onto a stool like his legs forgot how to hold him. "Oh, kid," he said, voice cracking. "Oh, no." Eli's chest tightened. "That's not an answer." Noah looked up. His eyes were glossy but steady. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I'm your dad." Eli felt a rush of heat that didn't feel like comfort. Eli's voice broke. He hated that it broke. You just stayed here. Noah flinched like he deserved the hit. It's not. He shut his mouth, then tried again. I didn't know where you were. I looked. I swear I looked. Eli's hands trembled. The metronome pressed against his palm through his pocket like a reminder, keep time, keep control. Noah took a breath. I met your mom when she was playing keys at a little spot down on Jackson. She made the whole room quiet without asking. I'd never seen anything like it. He stared at the floor. We were together for a while. Then I messed up. I was using. Not proud of it. And when she told me she was pregnant, I panicked. Eli's stomach turned cold. So you left. Noah nodded once. I left. The words sat there, simple, ugly, undeniable. Eli felt something sharp form behind his ribs. She died, he said flat. 2 years ago. Noah's face crumpled. I know, Noah whispered. I found out too late. And then I tried to find you, and everything's locked behind systems and paperwork and shame. He looked at Eli like he was trying to memorize him in one glance. You look like her. Eli's eyes stung. I don't want to look like her. I want her back. Noah swallowed hard. I know. A long silence filled the shop. Then Eli unlatched his keyboard case and set the small keyboard on the counter. He placed the brass metronome beside it and wound it. Click, click, click. I need to practice, Eli said, voice tight. For the fundraiser. Noah blinked. For Kessler's thing, Eli nodded. He made a deal. He said if I impress the room, he'll adopt me. Noah's face darkened. That's not a deal. That's a circus. Eli's jaw clenched. It's a chance. Noah leaned forward, the shame still on him, but something protective underneath. Eli, listen to me. People like Grant Kessler don't give chances. They give tests they already decided you'll fail. Eli's hands curled into fists. Then I'll pass it anyway. Noah stared at him a long moment. Then he stood, walked to the corner, and pulled the cover off the upright piano. It wasn't perfect. It was old, scratched, loved, but it was real. If you're going to walk into that room, Noah said, voice steady, now you don't practice on a toy. Eli's breath caught. I can't afford. You're my kid, Noah said, and the words sounded like they hurt him and healed him at the same time. You don't pay me to be your father. Eli's throat tightened. You don't get to say that like it fixes anything. Noah nodded. You're right. He pointed to the bench. Show me what you're playing. Eli sat down slowly like he didn't trust the ground. He placed his fingers on the keys. The metronome clicked, and Eli played. At first, it was a simple pattern, something his mother used to hum while washing dishes, like she was turning chores into music so life wouldn't feel so heavy. Then, Eli changed it. He fractured it, bent it, built it into something larger, something that sounded like rain on concrete, like buses, sighing at stops like a kid waiting for a mom who isn't coming back. Noah didn't speak. He just listened. When Eli stopped, the last note fading into the shop's dusty air, Noah exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for 13 years. That's yours, Noah whispered. That's yours, Eli swallowed. I wrote it. Noah's eyes shone. You wrote that. Eli nodded, suddenly embarrassed. My mom taught me how. She said playing other people's songs is like reading. Writing your own is like telling the truth. Noah's mouth trembled. She was right. Eli stared at the keys. Kessler thinks I'm noise. Noah's voice went low. Then we make him hear you. Eli turned to look at him. We Noah hesitated like he didn't deserve the word. Then he nodded. If you'll let me. We. Eli didn't answer yes. Not fully, but he didn't say no. And in a shop full of broken instruments waiting to be repaired, that was its own kind of music. 2 days later, Grant Kessler stood in his office high above the waterfront, looking out at the water like he owned the horizon. His glass-walled suite was all clean lines and expensive quiet. A sculpture that looked like twisted metal sat in the corner, probably worth more than Harbor Light Shelter's entire budget for a year. Maya Lin placed a folder on his desk. The final guest list is confirmed. Media is locked. Auction items are in transit. Grant didn't look at the folder. What about the kid? Maya's stomach tightened. Eli Carter. Yes. Grant's smile returned like a blade sliding into a sheath. Good. The room's been buzzing since that sidewalk video. Maya's voice stayed careful. Some people think the offer was cruel. Grant shrugged. Some people think rain is personal. He walked to the window. I'm giving him an opportunity. If he's smart, he'll take it and learn his place. Maya's hands tightened around her tablet. Sir, he's 13. Grant turned. And I built my first company at 22. He lifted his eyebrows. Life doesn't care about age. There was a knock. A man in a suit stepped in Grant's legal counsel. Mr. Kessler, the lawyer, began. We need to discuss liability. Minors. The adoption claim, Grant waved him off. It was conditional, public, clear. The lawyer hesitated. Public is the problem. There are witnesses. If he performs well and you refuse, Grant's smile widened. He won't perform well. Maya's phone buzzed. She glanced down and felt her blood turn cold. Sir, she said quietly, Noah Reyes posted online. He says he's Eli's father. He says he'll be attending. Grant's eyes narrowed. Reyes Maya nodded. Instrument repair guy. He's been getting support in the comments. Grant's jaw clenched. Of course he'd show up. Small people love a stage when they think the crowd will clap for them. Maya swallowed. This is escalating. Grant walked back to his desk and pressed a button on the intercom. Security! I want control at the pavilion. The kid comes in through service. No wandering, no interviews unless approved. He paused. And make sure Reyes stays in his assigned area. I don't want him backstage. I don't want him near donors. Maya's mouth went dry. Grant looked at her. Don't. Maya held his gaze. Something inside her tightened into resolve she didn't fully understand yet. Grant picked up his pen like he was signing a contract with the universe. If the kid embarrasses himself, he said almost pleasantly, people will stop romanticizing the streets. That's a public service. Maya didn't answer. Outside, the water moved on without caring who was rich. And somewhere across the city, a brass metronome kept time for a boy who didn't know if he was walking toward salvation or another kind of abandonment. The night before the fundraiser, Reyes Repair and Brass was closed to customers, but the lights in the back stayed on. Raina Patel sat on an overturned bucket near the door, a paper bag of takeout untouched in her lap. She'd insisted on coming not to interfere, but to witness. To make sure Eli wasn't alone with a father who'd once left. Noah sat on the piano bench beside Eli, not playing, just watching his hands. Eli's fingers moved in patterns that looked too fast for his age, but the speed wasn't the point. The point was control. The point was telling the truth without flinching. The metronome clicked between them, wound tight. Click, click, click. Again, Noah said softly. Eli nodded, jaw set, and started the piece from the beginning. It began almost childlike, a few notes that felt like a kitchen light turning on. Then it darkened. Harmony slipped sideways like someone changing lanes without signaling. The melody bent towards something that didn't resolve because grief doesn't resolve on schedule. Raina's throat tightened. She'd heard kids cry. She'd heard adults break. But this was grief, translated into something people could hear without looking away. Noah's eyes were wet, but he didn't wipe them, like he didn't deserve dryness. When Eli finished, he sat still, shoulders rising and falling. Raina spoke carefully. Eli, what are you going to do if Kessler tries to stop you? Eli stared at the keys. Then he proves what he is. Noah exhaled. That room is going to be stacked against you. Eli's voice was quiet. Then I'm not playing for the room. Raina nodded. Who are you playing for? Eli swallowed. My mom. The metronome clicked. Noah's voice cracked. Tell me about her. Not the he, gestured vaguely ashamed, not the version that ends with me leaving. Tell me the real her. Eli didn't look up. She sang when she cooked. She hummed when she was scared. His voice thinned. When she got sick, she couldn't talk much at the end. But she still tapped rhythms on my wrist, like she was reminding me I was here. Raina's eyes stung. She looked away. Noah whispered, I missed all of it. Eli finally turned. His expression wasn't forgiving. It was honest. Yeah, Eli said. You did. Noah nodded, accepting it like a debt. A knock rattled the front door. All three froze. The shop was closed. The street outside was dark. Noah stood and moved toward the front, cautious. He peered through the glass and cursed under his breath. Raina joined him. Who is it? Noah unlocked the door, a crack. A man in a long coat stood under the awning rain, dripping off the brim of his hat. His posture was careful, like he knew showing up uninvited was a risk. Raina Patel, he asked. Raina frowned. Yes. He held up a card. Judge Alton Price. Raina's eyes widened. She'd seen his name on donor lists, on civic initiatives, on the kind of panels Grant Kessler liked to sit on so he could look generous without being kind. Judge Price spoke quietly. I'm sorry to intrude. I'm here because tomorrow night is going to be worse than you think. Eli stepped into view behind them. His spine stiffened. Judge Price's gaze landed on Eli and softened. You're Eli. Eli didn't answer like a child. He answered like someone who'd learned adults could be dangerous. What do you want? Judge Price didn't flinch. To keep the game from being rigged. Raina's breath caught. What did Kessler plan? Judge Price's jaw tightened. He invited press to frame it as a miracle chance, but he also booked a conservatory team to perform after you. Someone trained, polished. A contrast. A setup. He looked at Eli, and he's got donors placing bets. Not officially, but it's happening. Eli's stomach dropped, then steadied into something colder. Of course, Judge Price continued, I can't stop the fundraiser. Kessler controls the venue. But I brought 3 people who can listen with authority. A music professor, a union rep for the venue musicians, a local composer with real credibility. He held out his card. If they say you're the real thing, nobody in that room can pretend otherwise without looking like a liar. Eli stared at the card like it was a door that might open or slam shut. Why do you care? Eli asked. Judge Price's voice went quiet. Because I grew up in South Park. I've been the kid people assumed would fail. He swallowed. And because grown men shouldn't build their confidence by breaking children. Noah stepped closer, protective now, in a way that looked new on him. You think Kessler will let you in? Judge Price's mouth tightened. He already did. I'm on his board. Raina's eyes flashed. Then help us in there. Judge Price nodded. Tomorrow night I'll be in the room. And when Kessler tries to turn you into a punchline, he looked at Eli. He'll have to do it with witnesses who won't laugh. Eli didn't say thank you. Not yet. He just wound his metronome again. Click, click, click. And he returned to the keys, playing his piece one more time. Not softer, not safer, but truer. If you're still with me, don't blink. Because the next room changes everything. The Elliott Bay Glass Pavilion looked like someone had built a jewel box on the edge of the water. Walls of glass, white lights, valets in black coats. A red carpet that made charity feel like an award show. Inside, the sound was money laughter that didn't worry about tomorrow. Heels clicking on polished floors, champagne flutes chiming like tiny bells. 500 guests, donors, executives, influencers pretending they weren't influencers. Cameras moving through the crowd like sharks that preferred designer perfume. A grand piano sat on a platform near the center, black and glossy, its lid raised like a wing. Eli stood at a side entrance with Raina beside him, both dressed in clothes that were clean but clearly borrowed from another life. Eli's suit was second-hand tailored by Raina's determined hands. His shoes pinched. His hair was damp no matter how much he tried to smooth it. In his pocket, the brass metronome pressed against his thigh. A security guard approached, scanning them. You the kid, Eli nodded. The guard's expression softened just a fraction. You go through that door when they call you. Bathroom's down the hall. He lowered his voice. And, for what it's worth, don't let them get in your head. Eli blinked, surprised. Thanks. The guard shrugged like kindness made him uncomfortable. My niece plays. I know what it takes. Through a crack in the door, Eli could see Grant Kessler working the room like a conductor. Grant stood near the piano with a microphone, smiling, greeting people like he owned their gratitude. Maya Lynn hovered nearby, phone in hand, eyes scanning like she was tracking a storm. Judge Price stood farther back, watching with a controlled anger that didn't spill. Noah Reyes entered quietly through the crowd, invited by someone who looked like an old musician, with silver hair and kind eyes, one of Judge Price's witnesses, maybe. Noah's hands were clenched at his sides. Not ready, not forgiven, but present. A media producer whispered to a cameraman. The camera shifted toward the service door, hungry. Grant lifted the microphone. Good evening, he said, voice rich with practiced warmth. Thank you for joining us to support youth opportunity in Seattle. Applause rippled politely. Grant's eyes gleamed. Before we begin our auction, I want to share a story. Last week I encountered a young man outside my office playing music. A few chuckles. Grant continued smooth. He claimed he had talent. I offered him a challenge, a stage, a chance. He paused, letting the crowd lean in. And tonight, you get to decide whether that claim was real or just another street hustle. Eli's stomach tightened. Raina's hand brushed his shoulder, once grounding him. Grant smiled wider. Please welcome Eli Carter, age 13. The service door opened. You're up, the guard murmured. Eli stepped through. 500 faces turned toward him at once, and the air changed. It wasn't just attention, it was evaluation. It was people deciding what you were worth before you touched the keys. Eli walked toward the piano, the room stretching like a hallway made of eyes. He caught pieces of whispers. So young. Is this legal? This is either inspiring or disgusting. Grant's a genius at PR. Eli didn't look for Grant. He didn't look for pity. He looked for Noah. He found him near the back shoulders, tense eyes locked on Eli like a promise and an apology at the same time. Eli sat at the piano bench. The keys felt different than his little keyboard. He could feel the weight of each one, like the instrument was telling him, "This is real. Don't lie to me." He took the metronome from his pocket and set it on the edge of the piano where only he could see it. He wound it once. Click, click, click. Grant's voice floated from the side. Whenever you're ready, Eli placed his hands on the keys. He closed his eyes not because he was afraid of the room, but because he needed to remember the kitchen light, the humming, the tapping on his wrist. Then he played. One note, clear as a drop of water. Another. Then a simple pattern like a lullaby trying to be brave. The room quieted in a way Eli could feel in his shoulders. The melody grew, not louder at first, deeper, like it was sinking into the floorboards of the people listening. A woman in diamonds stopped moving her champagne glass. A man with a watch the size of Eli's whole future swallowed hard. Eli's left hand came in with a low rhythm that sounded like buses on wet streets, like footsteps under an overpass, like a kid walking alone without looking over his shoulder because he refuses to give fear the satisfaction. Then Eli changed the piece. He pulled the melody apart and rebuilt it with sharper edges, jazz-colored turns inside a classical frame. Tension that didn't resolve neatly because nothing about his life had ever resolved neatly. Somewhere in the crowd, a soft gasp. Judge Price leaned forward. Maya Lynn's eyes filled and she blinked hard like she was trying to keep her job and her soul at the same time. Grant Kessler's smile began to fade. Eli played the moment the shelter lights flicker out. He played the feeling of a hunger that makes you dizzy and proud at the same time. He played a mother's last humming so faint it was almost nothing and turned it into a theme that refused to disappear. The music swelled into a climax that didn't sound like triumph. It sounded like survival. And when Eli hit the final chord, he didn't let it crash. He let it hang. Like a question. For a breath, the entire pavilion held still. Then one person started clapping, slow, deliberate. Judge Price. Then Noah, hands trembling, clapped too. Then the clapping spread loud and unstoppable, like the room couldn't pretend it hadn't heard something real. Eli opened his eyes. He looked straight at Grant Kessler. He didn't smile. That was for my mom, Eli said, voice carrying without a microphone. The room hushed again, startled by the fact that the kid was a person, not a segment. Eli stood. And I'm not finished. Grant's jaw tightened. You've done enough. Eli's gaze didn't move. You said play something worth listening to. He sat back down. And before Grant could cut him off, Eli started the second piece. This one began with rhythm, sharp, uneven, like rain hitting a metal awning. He improvised, but not like chaos, like architecture being built in real time. Fragments of melody slipped in snatches of a Spanish lullaby, the cadence of a street preacher, the sound of laughter from the shelter hallway. Eli braided them together like they belonged to one city, one heartbeat. A man near the front whispered, "Is he making this up?" A woman beside him whispered back, "He can't be?" A music professor, one of Judge Price's witnesses, stood slowly, eyes wide like she'd just watched a language get invented. Grant stepped toward the stage, face tight. Stop. Eli's hands kept moving. Grant's voice rose. Stop. This isn't what we agreed to. Eli didn't look up. You agreed to listen. Grant reached for the mic again like it could save him. Judge Price moved first. Grant, he said loudly, cutting through the room, sit down. Grant turned shocked. This is my event. Judge Price's voice stayed calm, deadly. And that is a child. The cameras swung hungry for conflict. Grant's face reddened. He's making a mockery. No, the music professor said, stepping forward now, voice clear. He's demonstrating compositional skill most trained musicians don't reach in a lifetime. Grant snapped. He's homeless. Eli's hands finally stopped. He turned on the bench, metronome still clicking beside him. My mom had a degree, Eli said quietly. She taught music in public schools. His voice tightened. But you didn't ask. You just saw a kid in the rain and decided the story you wanted. Grant tried to laugh. It came out wrong. This is manipulation. Everyone's emotional. Maya Lin stepped forward then, and her movement made the room shift. People noticed her like she'd been invisible until she chose not to be. Grant, Maya said, voice shaking but steady. You invited press. You wanted a spectacle, she swallowed. You wanted him to fail. Grant stared at her like betrayal was a foreign concept. Maya, she continued, and you told security to keep him isolated. You booked a second performer to humiliate him. You called it contrast. A murmur spread like fire. Grant's eyes widened. That's true, Judge Price said. I heard it myself. Noah Reyes stepped forward from the back, voice rough. I practiced with him for a week. That kid didn't need contrast. He needed a chance to breathe. Grant's gaze snapped to Noah. You, Noah's jaw tightened. Yeah, me. The guy you tried to buy out. The guy you couldn't intimidate. Grant raised his hands like he was being attacked. This is a setup. Eli stood slowly, metronome still clicking. No, Eli said. This is you, hearing what you tried not to hear. Grant's mouth opened and closed, searching for control. Eli's voice stayed even. You promised something. In public. Judge Price stepped forward. You offered adoption if he impressed the room. Grant's face contorted. It was a joke. The word hit the room like a slap. Eli nodded, once small and devastating. So you lied. Grant barked. You think you can corner me. I built. Raina Patel walked onto the stage, then finally allowed in because the room had turned against the idea of keeping her out. She placed a hand on Eli's shoulder. Not possessive. Protective. You didn't build him, Raina said, voice clear. You tried to break him. Grant's eyes flashed. And what do you want, money, scholarships, headlines? Eli's throat worked. He looked at the crowd, then at the cameras, then at Noah. Then he made a choice. I don't want your adoption, Eli said. The room went still again, stunned. Grant blinked. What Eli's voice shook now, not from fear, but from the weight of choosing his own story in front of people who wanted to write it for him. I don't want to be a prize you hand out when you feel generous, Eli said. I don't want to be your redemption arc. He swallowed. I want school. A real one. I want a safe place to sleep. I want to keep playing. His eyes flicked to Noah. And I want my father to earn being my father. Noah's face crumpled, but he nodded. I will, he whispered. I will. Grant stood there exposed. The moral verdict didn't come from a judge's gavel or a billionaire's wallet. It came from a kid refusing to be bought. Maya Lin unclipped her badge from her dress, walked to the edge of the stage and dropped it onto the floor. The sound, small metal on polished tile, rang louder than it should have. I resign, she said, eyes on Grant. Not because you'll fire me, she took a breath, because I'm done helping you hurt people and calling it leadership. Another hush. Then the music professor spoke, addressing the crowd, not Grant. I can connect Eli with programs that don't require humiliation. Youth conservatory scholarships, housing support. She looked at Raina. Real pathways. Judge Price nodded. And I'll make calls tonight. Not for headlines, for paperwork. For stability. The cameras caught Grant Kessler's face as his power slipped. He tried to reclaim it with the only tool he had left. He lowered his voice, almost pleading. Eli, play again. The room tensed. Was this another trap? Eli studied him for a long moment. Then he picked up the metronome. He stopped it. The clicking died. Silence. Eli set it down gently and sat at the piano one last time. Not to save Grant, not to soothe the room, but to close the night on his own terms. He played something simple. A hymn his mom used to hum when she wanted to pretend everything was okay. He didn't make it flashy. He didn't make it complicated. He made it honest. And in the middle of that simplicity, Grant Kessler's face finally broke not into the pretty tears people post online, but into the raw, ugly kind that come when you realize you've been the villain in your own life. Eli finished. He stood. He walked to the edge of the stage and looked down at Grant. "My mom would have forgiven you," Eli said quietly. "She forgave everybody." He swallowed. "But I'm not her. I'm just the kid you tried to turn into a joke." He turned toward Raina and Noah and Judge Price. "I'm ready to go," Eli said. Raina nodded. "Let's go." The crowd parted as they walked out, some reaching for Eli like they could touch, meaning others staring like their world had shifted and they didn't know where to put their hands. Outside, the rain was still falling. But it felt different. Because Eli wasn't just surviving it anymore. He was moving through it on purpose. 6 months later, Rhea's Repair and Brass had a new sign in the window. "Free lessons Saturdays, ask inside." It wasn't fancy. It wasn't a miracle. But it was real. Eli sat at the upright piano in the back, teaching Lena how to keep her wrists loose. Deshawn tapped out rhythms on a practice pad. Kids from Harbor Light crowded in loud and alive, not invisible. Noah moved through the shop repairing a trumpet valve, pausing every few minutes to glance at Eli like he still couldn't believe he got a second chance. Raina stood near the door with a clipboard running the program, like she ran everything on grit and love and paperwork. Judge Price stopped by sometimes not to pose, but to help with permits and connections, and the boring stuff that makes change stick. Grant Kessler's name showed up in the news once in a while, less as a hero, more as a man under pressure. His foundation had to answer questions now. His donors demanded transparency. His image wasn't a shield anymore. Eli didn't track it much. He had a metronome to wind. Click, click, click. One afternoon, Eli looked up from the keys and saw Maya Lynn standing in the doorway holding a small box. She didn't smile like a brand. She smiled like a person. "I brought something," she said. Raina's posture tensed. "Why are you here?" Maya held up her hands. "Not for him." She stepped forward and opened the box carefully. Inside was a brass plaque, simple, clean, no corporate logo. It read, "The Harbor Light Music Room in memory of Mara Carter." Eli's breath caught. Maya swallowed. "I found your mom's name in old district records. She mattered. I wanted it written somewhere people can't pretend not to see." Eli stared at the plaque a long time. Then he nodded once. "Thank you," he said, voice quiet. Maya's eyes shone. "Keep playing," she whispered, and left without asking for credit. That night, after the shop closed and the last kid went home, Eli sat alone at the upright piano. Noah came in quietly and stood beside him. Eli didn't look up. "You still here?" Noah's voice was soft. "Every day." Eli's fingers rested on the keys. "It's still weird." Noah nodded. "It should be." Eli finally glanced at him. "You're going to mess up again." Noah swallowed. "Probably." Eli's jaw tightened. "And I'm not promising you anything." Noah nodded again. "You don't have to." Eli wound his metronome. Click, click, click. Then he played. Not a performance, not a viral moment. Just a boy telling the truth in a room that finally felt safe enough to hold it.